and they're wrong.
Right.
And so just trying to go through that technical.
All kinds of progress on transferring titles back.
And that's what I was going to mention is Tabitha is working. She's got a spreadsheet kind of tallying those things across the entire state. And as an example of that, like the Unity Forest State Scenic Corridor over near Unity, that was the whole idea behind that. Is Parks really the one that should be managing scenic corridors along highways? Probably not. And so there's a series of those of things that were transferred to us that really should have stayed in under ODOT's management and vice versa.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so she is continuing to make progress on that, albeit slow, because a lot of the folks obviously in Parks and in ODOT, a lot of those people changed. And so it really slowed that process down.
Right. Yeah. And I'd had conversations with staff again, mostly pre-COVID, about how enthusiastic I was about clearing all that up, in part because I'm hoping that those ODOT lands that are identified as parts of Parks are within our
Can we get that?
disposition policy,
and
not necessarily falling outside of it, even if it creates a public perception of us disposing of lands when we are not. It's beyond our control. So it's kind of it's a weird, wonky technical point, but it's kind of an important, weird, wonky technical point. In
Absolutely.
So
no, it's interesting. Just as another example, Hillgard Junction over on the east side, the way that was kind of divvied up, again, in my mind, doesn't necessarily make too much sense with how much stayed with ODOT. So that's another one that we're trying to get back. Some of that property moved back over into Parks.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
And these are good notes. Just thinking about the title of disposition, and then getting in some of the leased properties and those kinds of things. I'll make sure that as we kind of move down this path, we'll do that. Some examples. This was a transfer that was initiated by the city of Gold Hill in 2012. This was a piece that the city was interested in managing a little bit differently than the way that we've been managing it. They wanted to put in some low impact camping opportunities for folks along the river there. We had State Parks had already I think removed the restrooms there, and we're managing it just for river access because we had Valley of the Rogues so close. And so it was determined again that the city of Gold Hill could potentially manage this in a way that kind of fit with some of their planning. This was one in that transfer. You can see that first bullet, we did put a reversionary clause in there so that if their management of that property changed at some point, it would revert back to OPRD. And it was about a little over 9, almost 10 acres along I-5. This is an example of an exchange that we did with Department of State Lands. They have some property in Central Oregon, and the puzzle pieces tell the story there, right? That's just a sign of two agencies working together to make things work a little bit better. We were able to get a piece to add on to Brian Booth, and they were able to kind of complete a piece that they had there in Central Oregon. And then another example of us transferring about 35 acres. I think you all are familiar with this one, about 35 acres to Wallowa County after the county and Parks and the Land Trust and Wallowa Resources were able to complete the transaction of the East Moraine. This was an incredibly steep piece of property with no public access, because of that transaction that the county and that Marine Partnership had done, it was able to serve as a match and add to that kind of bank of land for the county. So just thinking through some of the conversation that we've had so far and kind of where we want to go from here. If you remember in the acquisition policy update in OAR and ORS, there was a lot of guidance around what kind of criteria the agency should be using to acquire property. There's not that kind of guidance for disposition. There's a DAS and through OAR and ORS, there's a pretty clear process, but again, not some of the criteria for kind of how we go about that. There's more parameters again on the process itself. And so as you think back to the acquisition criteria that we developed earlier this year, is the inverse of that enough? Are there gaps? Again, what I would like to get from you all a sense of what are the parameters, what are the guidelines, so that we can pull this group together and further that conversation. So in terms of policy goals, this is again a draft, but it's identical to the acquisition policy. I think that these goals apply either way. We can add to those or edit those. But I think the goals are, again, pretty clear for that. And we can take some time and sorry.
Yeah, so I know we probably won't dig into it in detail, but I when I look at these, I can see the value of yes, having the inverse as part of the lens, right? So if it does not equal. But on the previous list, I like you had the injustice of ownership thing, which wouldn't emerge necessarily on the act. I mean, it might and it might not. So I mean, I think things like that are valuable to consider.
And so when we get to the criteria, see if it's articulated in the way that it should be, because I'm not sure that it is quite yet. So it's a good point.
Well, I think it's your point, which is that it might be.
Is it enough? Yeah.
Your point.
So going into what we've developed is kind of the draft disposition criteria. I put both the acquisition and the disposition up there just to make it a little bit easier to compare and contrast.
Do you mean it may not on the disposition side? Because
For number one, the property or portion.
or is you just change have to may, or do you mean may not?
On the very
Disposition,
top,
dispositions.
property may have an absence of.
And
well,
then the number one, it says,
property.
May have recreational attributes of local significance. Do you mean may not?
So that's the difference
Or is it
from
have and may?
statewide versus local or
okay.
regional
I'm with you.
significance.
I'm with you now.
yeah,
Sure. Please, yes.
I just feel like, you know, that section that's right under mission impact, it's talking about an absence, purely focusing on an absence of these things, doesn't necessarily connect with number two, you know, a stable like mission partner. You know, if there's a partner in the community that wants that resource because it does have natural, scenic, I don't know that mission impact I don't know if we want to identify that particular piece up top as having an absence of these things so much as just diving into the property may. Like, do we need that first section?
The very top bullet.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of where it just seems disconnected from some of the other pieces that they may want the property because it has a cultural and historic quality to it.
And see the big the big push that started this whole conversation in the last decade, or more than a decade now, was when we were going through the legislative process where the counties came forward and wanted to shift the RV funding. And at that time, we were legislatively directed to be working with our local partners to talk about where it may be better suited for a local park manager rather than statewide. And so there would be a natural scenic cultural historic, but it's not of statewide significance. And then we got into this whole thing with the park system plan about categorizing, like here's 4 quadrants, right? And this one is a state park, and this would be more of a county park, and this is a city park. And it's like, do we really want to be defined? I mean, if we don't think, if you as a commission and the agency doesn't think that it's significant enough to be a state park, but it is significant enough to be a county or a city park because it has all of those values. So I'm with you. I don't know that it needs to be there. I think what we're trying to get to here is that it may not be a statewide
Right. It may not.
significance.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was trying to say a state park is this level and a county park
Yes.
might be.
Yep.
Because why would it be in a state system? It'd be like a national park. You wouldn't want.
Yeah,
you know,
I understand that. I don't know that we have a definition of what is
No.
important statewide versus local or
Right.
regional.
No.
That's very hard to define sometimes, although sometimes it's obvious. And
Sometimes.
sometimes a lot of gray area.
When you see it, kind of.
And
Yeah.
it's like overwhelming to who?
Overwhelmingly iconic statewide.
So I mean, you could keep that out and
Sure.
just play with the 3 and see how that feels.
It seems more flexible, I think. At least when
Right,
I
I
look
think
at
so
those 3
too.
bullets, that kind of is what
Yeah.
we're looking at, but more
Yeah.
flexible than
Mhm.
having to define.
Right, because there could be
You
a
could get stuck up
Right,
there.
there could be
Yeah.
a piece of property that currently is not under OPRD ownership that actually meets all our criteria, but we don't
We don't
need
need
to
it.
have it because it's being
Right.
managed just fine.
Fine.
You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it's like, it wouldn't mean that automatically
Yeah.
we need to go get something if it meets that.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
We could always add that in if we need it, but I think you could
Yeah.
practice on a couple
I
of that
think
we've
so.
done and
Yep.
just see how that feels.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think probably it was to try and keep with that same
Yeah.
formatting,
Yeah.
but
100%.
formatting doesn't always
Yeah.
make perfect sense. Okay.
So Matt,
Yes.
you put an amazing amount of work in this, and thanks, and it's always helpful. So I always have to struggle back when we were talking acquisition as well about statewide significance. Who's going to determine that?
That's
And I'm going to tell you that something that's really important to somebody in Fossil, in his view, ought to be important to the state. And I don't know how to address that, but playing the devil's advocate, I don't like it there.
Yeah.
If it's important to some Oregonians, then it ought to be important to all of us. And I don't know how to differentiate that.
I think we're saying the exact same thing.
Yep. I
Steve.
think so too.
I
Yep.
think if we take that first
We'll take
paragraph
that first
out,
paragraph out.
Yeah.
that property
Yeah.
may have an absence, take that off.
Yeah.
And I think that takes care of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the concern that it's like, it's not important to people in Portland.
That means it's
Yeah,
not
right.
important.
Yeah, well, it's
Yeah, I don't
complex.
put you guys in a spot that you have to be that
Yeah.
determiner,
Right.
right? Like that seems,
Understood.
you'll know when you know.
Exactly. Well, and it's a good point because we did stay away from that language on the acquisition
Yeah.
side where it
Right.
talks about
Yeah,
areas of outstanding.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah. No,
yep.
I think
So it's a
that
great point.
It's good. These are good, very important points in terms of figuring this out. And the fact that these come before the commission,
Mhm.
at least these give conceptual guidelines for commissions to have active discussion.
Yeah.
A kind of conceptual discussion of where these things are in terms of thresholds. And so as long as we do a decent job on the front end and well on the way here. So it allows the commission to sort of have those conceptual discussions, and then we kind of will know it when we see it. Not us probably, but future commissions will know it when they see it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess
Liz
I-
will be there.
I would just tell you guys to be thinking about, you have 3 brand new commissioners coming on here in the next couple months. And so
Yeah.
you're all very comfortable in this now. So think about, as the words were coming to us, that they're very clear for somebody new coming on, because you're going to
Right.
be explaining it to the person sitting next to you saying, yeah, but this means this, right? And it's like, oh, that's
Right.
great. Now, how do we make it really clear?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So
'cause
working
it's
to
32
articulate this
years old.
is good in terms of, envisioning those scenarios where people haven't been part of this conversation and still can pick it up and make some determinations there.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to leap onto another point,
Okay.
so I'll wait till we close out that.
The only thing I was going to add, in the non-essential property criteria and disposition considerations, we'll update, as we update this policy and this language, we'll update these. And this really does give, I think, great, more
Mhm.
kind of
Details.
in-depth and detailed guidance on that. And so we'll make sure that when we get through this process, we'll update these to match.
Right.
Because I think it's much easier to walk through very specific examples with this procedural guidance.
Yeah, absolutely. My question relates to item 3 there. I entirely understand and support the logic of OPRD's mission involves getting people in contact with lands and waters, but we also do have a kind of a preservation mission, and it's right in the mission statement and so forth. And also I do have concerns that, for example, today as we're touring around, we're seeing some portion of this park that's been preserved with marbled murrelet funding.
Yeah.
And I would hate to see this kind of logic be used in the future to tear holes in existing parks that we have delicately put together using a variety of different, both things that are sort of front country public engagement portions of the park, but also a little bit of backcountry that makes
some of the intrinsic
that experience intrinsically.
No, I struggle with this one as well. So
and
I'm glad
trying
you
to
brought it up.
define, and some of this relates to scale. For example, I look at a large park. Again, I just mentioned Oswald West. That's a good example. There are portions of that park that people don't get to, but somehow the majesty of being in the middle of this old growth and having all of that there and the headlands and so on are contributing to the visitor experience significantly. And so where we draw the lines is interesting to me. And, the question is, and it's almost a question of scale, like how much preserved land, excluding people, does there have to be before we cross this threshold? Or are we talking sort of on a unit by unit basis? Like if we had an entire park that was entirely off limits, I can understand moving forward with this process. But my concern, I guess, would be if we apply this to a park where you have backcountry, that significant backcountry area that is, some sort of natural resource protection status, that we don't somehow inadvertently start carving those pieces away from the larger whole.
Yeah.
And I know that's probably much more articulated here than what we're discussing at this higher level, but that's on my mind a lot when we talk about that threshold. And again, we trust future commissions to make good decisions and so on. But if we can do more to kind of define what that means, in terms of a certain scale or a certain portion of an existing park that could be cleaved off because it has exclusively natural resource functions. I don't know. We have to kind of define some boundaries a little bit with that, I think.
Yes. So I had similar kind of reservations about it. And the reason it's in there is if you see that third bullet point under the acquisition criteria, again, it was to try and do some kind of an inverse. But I think that we could do better with that. Yeah.
What if we took out after land and waters and just took the rest of that out by excluding people rather than a resource rich benefit to the human experience? Because if you just look at it from like a consideration, the consideration is the property may include obligations or limitations that require a preservation of lands and water, period. And I feel like that leaves a little bit more flexibility around, it may include it and we still want it or we don't want it because it does kind of reach that threshold where it maybe might fit with a better conservation partner. But I don't, and maybe that's not the right approach, but that's just reading it leaves it a little bit more flexible.
Or if you added something, I'm not going to get the words right either, but instead of that, but that sets that may include obligations or limited lands and waters, that might be better addressed through a different management or ownership structure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's
Very similar to with the.
I wonder if there's
it's related,
maybe even a way of
but
combining.
it also could mean a
With the
change
mission
from a
part.
lease to an ownership to an easement to a something else, right? So
Or to a conservation management.
Right.
Rather than a park.
And I was thinking, we don't have to go back, but I was just doodling with the other ways you could sort of title the whole thing, which might be considerations for changes in property ownership or management status. Which could mean disposition, it could be changing from lease to own, it could be meaning, so it's.
Right. Or could lease something to somebody else.
Which is a
Instead
mouthful.
of transfer.
Disposition is much more concise, however.
I think that sounds better.
Yeah, I do too.
Disposition freaks everybody out. And
Yep.
it's like,
Right.
it's
Where
more
you dispose of it.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
it's much more descriptive of
Yeah.
the entire process. Okay, thank you.
I had another just thought when they were talking about bringing people on too, which I think you guys would totally be on top of, given how well you train us. But that in bringing people on and helping them understand both this acquisition and disposition is to give them some examples
Yeah.
So how would you apply this? And you give them some scenarios, let's talk through it,
Mhm.
you know, so that they can actually not just look at the words, but be like, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Sort of like the
Yeah.
field trip version. Oh, I see it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we do have, I think one of the, I can't remember if I sent this attachment or not, but we do have and it was developed at a similar time that the procedures were developed, a questionnaire that does kind of walk you through.
Yeah.
And again, that's one we'll update as we get this updated, but I think that's a great idea, is to provide some examples and walk through. Okay, so I'm actually going to work on that before I pull the group together and probably send it back to you all for this first one. And if there's other edits, before we pull that group together, just to make sure that you're all kind of comfortable with that. And then, sorry for the small font. Again, so here's the comparison between that draft disposition language and acquisition.
We can start now. Jonathan's here.
Now the Metro owns all those parks we didn't want.
We gave him all the bedroom.
Sounds good. Master plans being land use. The hazardous waste part is tough, but you got it.
You got it.
Oh, we got some of those. Now in Portland Harbor. Yep. Got a little bit of money.
Thoughts on the strategic objective criteria?
I'm just sitting here appreciating your patience.
This is
Have
a
anything
lot.
specific to say?
And you can also take them, I mean, so you're also processors too, so you have them, but now
Yes.
that you know what
Yeah.
we need, you can always take them and provide feedback. We're happy
Absolutely.
to take it after
Yep.
today. It's a lot to try to group study in a meeting.
It really is. And like I said, I'll, of the edits that we talk about, I'll make some of those, get it back to you all, prior to pulling an internal group together.
And maybe even take one that we've done more recently and just kind of
Yeah,
apply
right,
it
that's-
in.
that's
Yeah.
where I was saying the example. helps a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cause like you've got North San Yam and we've
Yep.
got the Fort Yamhill, like we've got a couple of these coming up that, you know, those are ones to play with as an example.
Yep, that's a great idea. In fact, I
Or one that
can
we've done, I don't.
attach that questionnaire
Yeah,
too, as a way to kind of walk through some of those. Even though it may not match this exactly yet, it'll, I think, give you a good sense. So,
please. You have permission? Like what? That's so new.
I know, I'm trying to change my ways. No, as Dennis pointed out this morning, as we were pulling up to the ODOT facility, at the entrance, that was one that we had a kind of a lease to own arrangement that we were working on. And would that be an example of one that didn't need to come to the commission when we change that particular structure?
I don't think we came to the.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, I don't remember it because it was kind of news. Yeah,
Well, it was also like a crazy money saving thing, and it wasn't necessarily park, right? It was a region office, and we were like,
right.
it
So
doesn't
that's what I
make
was
sense
thinking
to
of.
have rent with a lease to own go up. Well, we own a property, we could convert with staff and save a whole bunch of money and be in a park setting rather than a,
Yeah.
oh, so.
Well,
Um,
earlier the discussion was, would there ever be a situation where we were relinquishing a lease that wouldn't come to the commission? And
Oh,
that struck me
right.
as, hey,
So-
that might be an example of one.
Yep.
Totally,
Okay.
because it wouldn't have been a park lease like we would do with BOR or US Forest Service
Right.
or the Corps or somebody like that. It was a lease for,
Yeah, like a lease of a regional office space.
well,
or
because we were downtown for a while too. We were in a lease with, when we were in that other building. That would have been a lease with a private
Right.
owner for office space.
Yeah.
So do you want to?
For those kinds of things, I think we're required, well, I know for office space, we're required to get that approval through DAS.
Well,
That's what I was just
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
ask, is it covered under some other?
Yeah.
I think this is more
procedure?
around our park
Yes.
land acquisition and park land disposition, not.
Not
off-
administrative and office space. Yeah.
Can you clarify that, attorney? Because we might have violated that a few times.
You're breaking up. I didn't hear that.
Yes.
That's it, yeah.
On this one, too.
Sure.
Okay.
And then Steve.
Well, I guess it's not a question. It's more of, I kind of feel like urgent opportunity
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily belong as a separate piece under disposition. It seems like a lot of those key features that might be helpful on acquisition
Mhm.
aren't necessarily the same for a disposition and maybe fall under strategic objective instead.
Yes.
So like, unable to, for instance, the exchange piece, like that would kind of fall under strategic objective. You want to acquire this certain piece and exchange it.
Mhm.
And it doesn't seem like we have that same need under disposition to have a subsection of urgent opportunity.
Yeah, you're right. Because exchanges entail kind of both acquisition and disposition, I think is why it's in there. And I completely agree. I was looking at this one last night thinking, should we keep it in there or not? But because any kind of an exchange affects both acquisition and disposition, I left it in just for a point of discussion, if nothing else. But I think it could be.
Yeah, I'm wondering if
Potentially.
we can just consolidate some
Yeah.
of those under
Yeah.
strategic objective.
Yeah.
And then do we come up with a new piece around injustice of ownership? I mean,
Mhm.
I think that's the other piece that as I read all of this is lacking, is kind of this bigger objective of in disposition, we may deal a lot more with the historical injustice of ownership
Mhm.
as opposed to the acquisition
Right.
counterpart.
Right.
And do we think through kind of what that looks like as a commission on those bullet points of what's important?
I think so.
I think along those lines, we're already thinking that the term disposition isn't maybe the right one, but I also think when you use disposition, it makes it all negative. It's like, it
Right.
doesn't check any of these boxes. So
Yeah.
as opposed to a proactive, positive reason to dispose of, to transfer ownership of something,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Right. And I think that's to your point.
That's
It's like,
right.
there could be really good reasons to do it.
Yeah.
And so shifting the language so that
But
it's
they're more
like, it's
strategic.
an opportunity.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to make that change.
Right.
Right.
And it's not just a negative opportunity,
Right.
or
Or
not because it
urgent.
doesn't fit with us, or it's not, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's like there are better places for it to
Right.
be, or better structures for it to be managed under, or whatever. So I think that
Yep.
helps with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There are moments where you're running to something and moments where you're running from something.
Right.
And I think that in some ways the concepts could almost be organized out that way, but
Okay.
this handles most of those
Mhm.
contingencies really without having to reorganize anything.
Because like that urgent would have been that DSL exchange or something, right?
Right.
Where
Right.
it's like, is it really urgent or is it more?
Right. Well, and I think when I think of the urgency piece, again, it may be that we're getting rid of a piece of property, but the urgency probably is going to be more about what we're getting, what we're acquiring, rather than,
Mhm.
to your point, rather than what
Right.
we're disposing.
Yeah.
Or
But it's sort
moving out
of,
of
yeah,
ownership,
exactly. And yet it's sort of an inverse piece
is.
because there's still that urgency
Mhm.
in the mix.
yeah,
and maybe, I mean, procedurally, it might imply kind of a streamlined approach, maybe, but we
Right.
don't want to just give up with due diligence either. So we still want to, I don't know, it doesn't create a clear pathway to disposition, but at least it creates some justification and logic for an accelerated process or something like that. Anyway.
Yeah, something that we need to make capacity for, finances or
Right.
what have you. Yeah.
I could see the urgency, and I agree with the points about maybe not a separate category, but there could be urgency on the part of someone who has the capacity to take land. They have a time limited window to access resources that allow them to do it.
Yeah.
So it could be urgent for the sake of the person, of the entity that would be on the receiving end. And so it doesn't,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
not
some of these-
necessarily urgent on our part, but it could be important to
Some of
act.
these, it's been that, like,
Yeah.
we're in the conversation with the county, and if we hurry up and transfer the management over, then they have the ability then to apply for local government grants that went from
Exactly.
12
Right.
to 25%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I agree, it could be under mission or strategic.
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay, okay.
Hmm.
So Matt, under strategic.
Yeah.
I wondered if maybe, maybe something we ought to have as a consideration is what if it's a real priority for a local group, community, city, county, whatever? Should that be part of our strategy? Is
And I think,
somebody a point says this is really important to us?
let me see if that's, I'm bumping down to the engagement piece, to see if maybe.
Sure, maybe, yeah.
In there. And it may not be, and I think that may be where we would want something like that if it's something important to a local community, that it may be in that engagement.
And what we've been doing with most of those when they're urgent to them, but we haven't been able to engage with you and the community, we've been doing like an MOU where they can manage, but we're not disposing of or transferring to
Right.
whatever the word we're going to use. It's been more of a, because we do that often where it might make sense that somebody else is managing
Takes
it
over
for us.
management,
Yeah.
right, and not necessarily ownership.
Do we have a sense of how many of those have happened? We had that list of 10, the last 10 years with disposition.
Mhm.
I'm wondering ballpark, how many of those kinds of arrangements that we entered into? They're not disposition where we're retaining title, but we're transferring management.
The only-
Not a whole lot more
No,
though.
the only other one
Yeah.
I can think of that's very
Right
recent
now is
would
North
be
North
Crook
Sandy.
County along Ochoco Reservoir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had an IGA with them for a number of years and then eventually transferred ownership.
Right. Weren't there one or two in southwestern Oregon? No? Okay.
I'm not
I
sure.
don't, we were in conversation with one you're gonna talk about, I think tomorrow with the county, but we never transferred.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, no.
Cascadia was that and we transferred it.
Mhm.
North
Right.
Sandy, right now the county,
Jackson County.
Jackson County was Joseph Stewart.
Right, right.
But that did, yeah, it's not on there because it wasn't ours. And then right now we're in that same conversation. Fort Yamhill is being managed currently by the tribe.
Yeah, we haven't.
Right.
IGA with
Right.
the tribe.
But I think, did we ever, for some reason, what, Quanda, Tillamook County? Some of that's in my head. Why is that in my head? Okay. But Quanda with the parking lot and there's no MOU there right now?
Is there a,
Just Rob. Okay. So there's a few of those, but we
Yeah.
could pull those out for you. I don't know that they're new.
yeah, I don't
necessarily,
need,
but
I don't
yeah.
necessarily want to send people off. And I don't know why people contact me about this stuff, but I get contacted by people about this stuff. And sometimes it's the shift in management that gets people's attention,
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
or the perception of the change in
Sure,
management,
sure.
because who knows? I'm not fact checking these people, but
Yeah.
but is there a certain, like when we do that, is there a certain way that we message that to the public? Like, are we, because again, I'd had one cranky person talking with me about how they'd seen like some kind of local government sign over a state park sign saying now managed by. I never fact checked that one, but I was wondering, like, could we sort of in a celebratory way say, managed in collaboration between OPRD and Marion County, for example, or is there a certain way to spin that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds as upbeat as possible.
No, I think it's a great point. And again,
Yeah.
thinking about how we title this policy, where it's more about property ownership and management, like we were
Right.
talking about earlier, combined with that website, that's going to host the information of when we are looking at, we have to find another word than disposing of a piece of property, but that will have that so that folks know where to keep track of that, what to look for, those kinds of things. I think that.
Yeah. I don't want to propose too much spin, but carefully, collaboratively managed by something that kind of accentuates the fact that it is still in our management, and yet there's this great cooperative opportunity there.
So
anyways,
if the lawyer was writing, it would say recreational immunity enjoyed by both local government and state.
Yeah.
Hey.
So when you print the signs, talk to Shipsy.
Okay, so what I'm hearing with some of the urgent opportunity criteria about potentially bringing that up into the strategic objective, which I think makes a lot of sense, and I think some of those fit really well together, and are almost a little bit repetitive. And then Commissioner Hill, you mentioned potentially having a separate criteria for that injustice of ownership.
I'm not 100% sold on it. I want to, I mean, I threw it out there, but I don't feel like in reading through this
that we're hitting
that's hitting it. And I don't know where I would place it within those three categories. So
Other considerations.
there may be beyond just injustice and ownership, some other pieces like geographic distribution of parks that again, reading strategic objectives and the disposition from the disposition perspective maybe doesn't hit that as a priority in the verbiage. So maybe that's a part of something with injustice and ownership and a different title.
Yeah. Do we have example, just to bear down on that for a second, do we have examples of injustice in ownership cases that we've been considering? Like, is there a clearer case in mind?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Because I appreciate that very much like some of these other things we're talking about, it is on some level in the eye of the beholder. There are some Native communities that say, well, that's any ownership is injustice, right?
Sure.
And that gets us on an interesting slippery slope there. But there are certain specific cases where that might come into focus. So that's another one where I think it's on one level very important to have it in there. It's part of my day job. But I also think that defining terms somehow on that's going to be important in terms of where those thresholds are, because I think that you could have very rational people disagree widely in terms of where that injustice of ownership falls. Reasonable people can disagree on that. So and I still agree it should be in there, but how to define
but how do we phrase that and define it?
It's almost like, and again, I don't know where it goes, but if you take going back under mission, there may be stable, like my mission partners willing or capable of managing the property. There might be something saying another owner or manager may be more appropriate. There may be a more appropriate owner or manager of this property for a variety of reasons, including historical and just what, I mean, whatever the including, or even leave out the including, where you just say it may be more appropriate for there to be another one, which could include.
Right. Yeah, there are, I will think about that.
I will too.
There are things about like using language, so like historical association with, I don't know.
Yeah, it depends how
there are categories that start to kind of, they're
just leave it open to other, for a variety of reasons and considerations, which could be.
So it can be on the table and yet not necessarily a deciding factor on it.
So someone might say, I'm a fifth generation. Or,
yeah.
And oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I would really strongly encourage us to have some really good criteria around what that looks like, because I think that could get very wide open.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. It could just
I did not mean
immediately
to open a can of but I do think we need to think through that.
You're gonna have it.
Very smart language around it.
I
was
think
thinking through that same thing.
That's probably one of the biggest reasons we need to update that 1991 policy is to be prepared for those kinds of conversations, right?
What does that look like?
I'm laughing with you.
Okay, well, I don't know if you have anything else.
Sorry.
No, this is exactly what these are for.
Yeah.
I mean, they really are.
Okay.
And that's why it was I think rhetorical, the question of, is the inverse of the acquisition policy enough? So I don't think it is. And so but that's the place that we have to start from.
And it gets you reasonably close,
Exactly.
so you
Yep.
can fine tune from there.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
I'm just taking
absolutely.
a couple of those and
Yeah.
using those examples and running through will be.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I guess in hindsight, I should have thought to do that, is to bring in some examples and kind of walk through. But I think at least having this place to start
I
from
think it's a good start.
and fine tuning it, we can come back and do that. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
So the next steps may change just a little bit. So what I will do is review and compile this still, but I'll send it back to you all before pulling again that broader group together. And Chair Allen has agreed to help with that process, and I'm so grateful that you'll be there to help with that. So
An emeritus.
emeritus commissioner, I love it.
It brings that
Yeah,
consistency
yeah,
and history with
yeah.
it to.
And I think that'll bring a lot of credibility to the table as well when we're pulling folks in that may see things a little bit differently. So, and then again, that last bullet point is just talking about we're in the process of figuring out exactly what it's going to look like so that we can have that kind of outward facing information for when we look at transferring, exchanging, or need to find another word for the disposing of property. And that was all I had.
No more questions. It was
Yeah.
like how quick you moved on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Great feedback.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
I want to thank you formally and loudly in front of everybody, just for your thoughtful and patient approach to this. It's a sensitive range of issues, and your willingness to hear us out patiently and consistently over time is very appreciated. Thank
Good.
you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the guidance and the feedback and the patience you have with me. I was thinking about when I got up here today, I was like, oh, they're going to roll their eyes to hear more property stuff. So thanks for your patience too.
It's only
Thank you.
32 years old. I mean, awesome. Thanks, Matt.
Great, thanks, Matt.
I did that on purpose.
You did what?
So we're up, it's a small world
need a break?
after all. It's a small.
Okay, we need
it's
a
Ranger
quick-
Life, sorry.
We need a quick break. Okay, break.
Quick break.
And then we're gonna get some more water.
I will bring us back together and take it away.
This would be fun.
Yeah. What's it really like out there? Can we sign up for this?
Absolutely.
How are we doing? Okay. We are good. Maybe we're good. Says you are. Okay. Good afternoon. Chair Allen, Vice Chair Hill, members of the commission, Director Lisa Sumption. My name is Joe Niehaus. I'm a policy advisor out of the Government Relations and Policy Unit. I'd like to introduce Jared Mangini, Coastal Region Resource Manager, who was recently the Park Manager of Beverly Beach State Park, and Dennis Comfort, Coastal Region Director. So we're here to present to you at this workshop about a ranger shadowing experience that I got to do this summer, back in July, peak summer season at Beverly Beach. And before I dive in, I'd like to ask Dennis to give a little context of how this started and why we did it and how we got here today.
So this isn't a real new concept, but it's something that people talk about, but don't necessarily engage because it's kind of a commitment for anybody to do. And so last spring, I was speaking at the headquarters all staff meeting, the first time they'd had everybody together in one place since COVID. And so there was a lot of energy in the room, and the three region directors were talking, and into my head popped this statement that I would like to start doing some sort of an exchange with headquarters so we can start bridging a gap between office culture and field culture. There's always been a gap that we have tried to close, and the best way to close it's through relationships and experience together. And so I made a commitment to that group that we would start an exchange program where we would bring folks from headquarters out and not just walk around with a ranger, but actually do the work, put on a uniform, take the safety modules so that they're safe, and go through the whole process and procedure, almost like you're a seasonal or a ranger for a week, and try some different things. And so we picked Joe to be the guinea pig because of her enthusiasm and her care for the field and the ability to create those relationships, because this either is successful or not based on the foundation that we lay. And so we haven't got clear to the point where we have a structure in place for selecting the candidates and how that works. But this was a kind of a shakedown cruise for the things we need to look out for and how we bring somebody on, and how the schedules work and we don't break contract, and a lot of different nuances to this simple concept that actually has a lot of tentacles associated with it. So with that, we'll let Joe take off on it, and then we'll start talking about some other stuff after she's done.
This is a polite way of saying she was the only one that said yes.
That's not. I have been with the agency since 2019, and I didn't start out in the field like a lot of folks do and have the opportunity to get that direct experience and move up. So I was always kind of itching to find ways to get out into the field as much as possible. One of the advantages of being in a headquarters position is you get to see a lot of the state and get to go to a lot of the parks. And my policy position is unique in that I get to interface with so many folks from across all of the parks, as well as all of the different departments that we have in the agency. And it is intimidating, the number of units and departments and experts that we have. So getting to do this opportunity, 4 years in with the agency was really special. I felt really privileged to have this time. And I also realized, having been with the agency for a little bit, I have my own set of preconceived notions about how things might be done. Which was both good and bad. I think it set up some anticipation and some nerves. And I also knew that I didn't want to go into it with this stigma of a headquarters desk jockey person, even though that's exactly what I am, and be able to contribute in a meaningful way and use this opportunity to learn. But one of the first things that Dennis did for me was to make sure that I got in contact early with the park manager. Jared was the park manager at Beverly Beach then. And Jared, if you want to give a little little input about how it felt for you to kind of get this assignment and know somebody was coming in for your team during, I don't know, maybe one of the busiest times of the year. That would be awesome.
So it's kind of not fair because I've gotten to work with Joe and some other things in the past and knew what an awesome human she was and knew that just her presence would make the Beverly Beach team that much better. And so at first when Dennis asked about doing it, it was kind of nonchalant, and next thing you know, it's like, schedule it, make it happen, we're good to go. Nice thing is in the busy summer, you don't have time to think about things too much and you're just going. But it made me realize this is important to make Joe part of the team in every aspect from start to finish. And like for adding Joe to the schedule, it's silly when you're managing a park, how much that schedule, everything revolves around it. And that's like, people go to it all the time. And so this kind of made me realize there's going to be a lot of little things that we need to do to make sure Joe feels welcome and can be the best that she can be, to come out and share herself with us. But it also got myself and the team extremely excited because we're proud of what we get to do and the way we get to serve the public. And we don't get to share that all the time. And so you can say it, but the actions speak louder than words. At least that's what my mom and dad always said growing up. So it was a really neat opportunity to get to jump in and let an amazing team's actions kind of speak for what we do out there.
Yeah, so this image that you're seeing right now, I made it a little bit blurry. And I feel like it helped making it less chaotic in some ways, but that's their schedule. That's like a couple weeks at a glance. And the different colors and all of those things have meaning. And when Jared first sent it to me, I was like instantly clammy and my heart rate doubled. So it was just a lot about accepting the uncomfortable and knowing that, you know, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to go learn things and it's all unknown to me. So just be ready to roll, be ready to stay out of the way. I'm very good at getting in the way of things. So it was, it caused a lot of nerves, but I had a lot of help getting ready. And I apologize. This presentation's full of a lot of pictures of me and it's a little embarrassing. So
And she's had to do it like 4 times in the last month, so she's probably getting tired too.
well, bear with me, and I promise there's pictures of other people in here too that are more interesting. But part of the ritual here is getting ready for the field and getting to put on that field uniform that I've never gotten to do before. So everything from your field cap to your jacket and your pants. Since I'm in the policy unit, tried to read up as much as I could to prepare. So I was trying to be well versed in the uniform policy, make sure I had all the right pieces, but it doesn't really prepare you for the, it's kind of a humbling experience to put on that uniform and wear that shield and that instant kind of shedding of like, oh, this is who I am and who I represent as part of this agency, and more like, oh, I am now I'm the agency. I get to represent this large shield that represents all these parks and people in different ways. And, you know, and I'm wearing a shield right now and there's a little bit of that, but paired with that field dress was, it was a different feeling. And I think that that's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. And there's definitely this, Jared talked about making me feel welcome, but there's like an instant sense of belonging. And I think when you see our crews out there in the field, they embody that very well. Oh yeah, the denim pants are a no-go. I learned very quickly, you want the cargo kind. This just, yeah. And the waterproof boots that's very important. And like I said, I want to talk about some people that were here. So you're going to see little profiles in here of my handlers for the week. So here's Jared. This is from when you were park manager. So since October 2006, native Oregonian. And Jared loves serving the public with an amazing team. And the whole week, this was my schedule at a glance. I got to shadow different people and what different activities that they were doing and tasks that they were finishing. And they all unprompted talked to me about how much they love being part of this team and how much that they like working for Jared and how he fostered this like sense of family within his unit. I don't know what you bribed them with, but they only said good things about you. Even when I tried to fish them to say, what were your challenges? That was very difficult. So it made my experience like even that much better, that people were contagiously excited and happy to have me on board. And getting to look at my week and getting to prepare was really helpful. So, you know, we broke it down to campground, restroom, showers, looking at the water quality and campground maintenance. One of the things that we did learn quickly was I asked for a booth and night shift, but I didn't ask Jared until my first day. And you don't want to jump in there with a schedule change the week of, because like Jared said, it is a complex thing. And they were very accommodating and flexible, and I got to do everything I wanted to do, but it was a learning experience in, you know, how to communicate with park managers and have everything set up before you get there, and some key little things that we got to learn on. But that's why I was the guinea pig.
I'll never forget when you asked that, and all I could think is, that's against union contract, Joe. We can't switch your schedule like that. I'm not represented. Do what you want. You're good.
3 hours straight. It's okay.
Yeah, that was a lot of work. But I slept like a baby every night because I was exhausted. So we did the South Run and North Run parks and restrooms too. So I really like in that week got to get a huge deep breath and depth of everything that they do. And really that's still just like tip of the iceberg. Like I got to be park ranger assistant for 5 days. And I can tell you, I could have been there the whole summer and still like have years that I need to go through before I really can know and understand. But it was a good start and I had a lot of fun. So day one, the team starts out every morning with a huddle. And there's a lot of them because it's a big park. It's less of a huddle and more of like a giant gathering. Yeah, exactly. And at first people were like, well, who are you? Or they recognized my name from the schedule because everybody looks at the schedule and said, oh, you're Joe. You're from headquarters. What are you doing here? What's your purpose? And, you know, it was all very like welcoming and nice, and very just met with a lot of curiosity. And at that point, I was like, I'm just here to learn what you guys want to show me. And I think like right off the bat, like it was just like open arms. They had already been onboarding new seasonals throughout that summer. So they were very used to bringing on new people and making them feel welcome and teaching as they were working along. So it was super easy for me to just step in there. And halfway through this huddle, and we talked about our names and did intros and our horoscopes, like I had already forgotten that to be nervous. So after the huddle, you know, we break off into doing the assignments, and really a little bit before the huddle, I may or may not have gotten lost on my way to the park shop. And of course, the park specialist, Chris Duncan, she's been there forever. She helped me get another set of uniforms, because when you're doing restrooms, you don't actually just want one set of uniforms to keep you for the whole week. The second set was really, really key. And Chris keeps everything running together over there. She's fantastic and so helpful. And she was already running through like a whole stack of onboarding things for the new seasonals. And her favorite thing is getting to help people, which she does so much. And the first person I got to shadow was Paul Kimberly. Paul's a fairly new ranger assistant. He came from California and had like such an interest in invasive species. So as we're driving along in the golf cart through camp to do the campground showers and restrooms, he would point out invasive species. And, you know, it's just an example of how every single one of our seasonals, they're doing this job because there's parts of it that they are so passionate about. And even among like doing things like looking at plants, they can stop and answer questions from visitors and still like keep a mental task list of all the things that they have to do. And immediately it's just like so impressive that you think you're just going to do a job where you check off a task list, and that's not it at all. And they have so much that they face on a day-to-day basis. And the picture is Ken with a sign that's stating that Camp Loop restroom is closed. but those signs don't matter. And when people gotta go, they're like, I've got to go. And the sign doesn't even need to be there. And the patience too, with just the cleaning, the answering questions, the keeping track of things, the supplies, and everyone has their own way of doing things and their own efficiencies that they've built in. And they're really excited to tell you about it, and they want you to do it their way. And so it was just like very fun to see that side and get to connect with people and learn more about them one-on-one. The real special treat for me was my very first shower I cleaned. There was what we call a shower monster. And those are not fun, clean surprises that you have to clean up when people go number 2 in a shower. And hilariously enough, like the next shower was the same. So like you hear about things, it's real. You hear about things at like a policy level. You're writing things down all the time. You're reading, you're researching, you're helping with rulemaking and presenting to the commission. And really, like, my function is to figure out what we have written down in these policies and rules will help our rangers do their job better, safer, more efficiently. And it's really getting opportunities like this to see like the things that they're exposed to and at what rate, and the way they just deal with it and let it roll off their backs, and the things that are challenging for them, that are struggles, and the things that aren't. And I'm gonna talk about that. So day 2 is another eye-opening day. I was so exhausted by 10 a.m. I got to do our water quality day, and Beverly Beach is like a little city with so many different camp loops and people. And I followed Blakely around doing the water collection and testing, making sure that we aren't poisoning people and keeping records, and then getting also to have some time in the booth and check people in and do campground loops, and then do a little bit of hazard tree removal in a campground campsite. Let's see if this oh my god, I can't do all this. There's just my iPhone do that? Yeah. And chemical and swallow and like difficulty of learning and keeping track of everything. And also the visitor interactions were, I mean, they ranged. It was a lot every day. But in the third photo, Blakely's posing with his axe, and we're about to do a hazard tree takedown. My job was to stay out of the way, which I'm not very, very good at, but also to help other people stay out of the way, which I was not very good at. And visitors would just, they're very sneaky. They're so stealthy. They just come up and they pop up behind you when someone's got a chainsaw going. And I'm like, oh no, you need to be over there. So there was a lot of just kind of those day-to-day small interactions where you realize like, gosh, it's a lot that they're thinking about at any given moment. So my handlers were Blakely. Blakely's from Illinois originally, and he loves the views and the amazing crew. It's kind of, everyone loves the crew here. And then in the booth, I got to hang out a little bit with Mika Mason and Paiute Morrison. Mika's the one actually that took the chainsaw, and she got that hazard tree out of the way there. She is from Salem, and the cool thing about Blakely and Mika are they both commute in from the valley
day.
every
from
single
Salem.
day. Yeah, they both have over an hour drive to get to work every day and back, and they do it. And that's it's just this, yeah, it's an insane level of commitment and passion, like rain, shine, snow, ice, like they're going to work. And
To be fair, half the crew of the 34 commute from McMinnville, Salem, Corvallis. It's something that, again, why I'm proud of this team, why they can want to come wear that shield like Joe's talking about and serve. It's pretty awesome.
it's really humbling too. I think like it just shows, yeah, how much people want to be here to do this job, and that you get to work with the people that are so keen and eager to serve, and like you just kind of want to like do your best to help serve them too. It's all just a gross, lovely circle. And then Paiu is a relatively new seasonal park ranger as well. He loves interpretation. So when I helped him that day, he was talking about improving some educational programs and some ideas that he had about engagement, and just like a lot of passion, a lot of enthusiasm. And it's just fun to see all of that from our rangers, regardless of how long they've been there. Day 3, this was my my night shift day. So during the day I had off, I went to our whale watch center and I tagged along with a volunteer that was running an interpretive event. And as you can see, the weather was so fantastic. I heard you all had really great weather today too. So just getting out on the coast when it's just blue sky day like that, and there were whales everywhere. It was wild. So it's so contagious seeing people visiting and getting excited, and the whales are on the screen, and the new interpretation center is really cool. It was really fun. And then I went up to Cape Foulweather, and again, more whales, more people, and just kind of getting to see from like a visitor perspective how it's going. And then the night shift starts at 3. So you show up, and this, it's hard to pick like your favorite day, but the night shift ended up being my favorite because you got to just sort of see a side of camp that you don't unless you're camping. And that rush of people coming in to try and check in from like 3 to 5, that's wild. And like our rangers in the booth, like they know they can tell you the rules, and they can tell you exactly where to go and point out things to you on a map. And they like know how to answer your question when you're only like halfway through asking the question. And it's just that kind of like finesse and efficiency in the booth. Like that was amazing to witness. I couldn't really like help out because I didn't know anything. But I got to observe a lot, and carried out a lot of firewood. There's people that love to buy firewood there. And then right around dinner time, you just get these smells, and people are cooking dinner, and it's so fun to drive around and make sure, people are parked on the pads correctly and the dogs aren't off leash. So you have a couple contacts, but really it starts to get this like almost like magical feeling of people bedding down for the day, or for the night, and people offering you like really delicious dinner, and they know, and you see a lot of really cute dogs and you want to pet them, but you can't. So you're just, driving around, taking everything in, and also getting to watch our rangers have some of these contacts. And, they're enforcement contacts, but really they're saying, hey, can you repark your vehicle, explaining rules, talking to kids about putting helmets on or going too fast. And it's just so many of these contacts that could potentially go bad almost always turned out so super positive, and with people leaving like happy and like not even knowing that they were a little bit reprimanded. That was very impressive. And then like the real magic when it hit quiet hours and people were compliant with quiet hours at 10, that kind of campfire smoky smell, which really isn't that good for you. I used to work in air quality, so you don't want to inhale too much of that. But there's a special like smell with the campfire in the woods, and I am totally bought in. And it's quiet and people are all snug in their tents or RVs, and there were stars that night. It was really cool. So here's a little. Right at dusk, I'm starting to get stars. I'm like, oh, things are green. That time. And then that was at quiet hours with Daniel and Chloe. And there's not a whole lot to see to start, but at the end of our last walk, we made it out to the beach, and the stars were how there were a few campfires on the beach, and then you could see like the fishing boats out, and it was just really, really cool. And you can tell that the visitors are so happy. It's so meaningful for them to have these experiences, and that for our staff, that getting to create these experiences and the sense of memories for visitors, it's important to them. So my handlers for that day were Chloe and Daniel, who did the night shift with me. Chloe's a park ranger assistant from Washington. She's very funny. She's very sort of like no nonsense and almost like a little bit grumpy, but really she was just the sweetest. And anytime people came up to her, she could just like make every single person that walked away from having a conversation with her like feel really, really good and special. And then Daniel's like this big ranger with the beard and looks very stereotypically park ranger is what I would say, and just so nice, and people sort of gravitate towards him because he has a great like personality and wants to like tell people about what he's passionate about. And then I got to do some of the campground loops with Taryn, and Taryn's brand new, but grew up in the area, so knows this area really well. She loved working here, but I think just recently left to pursue dental school. And the different backgrounds all of our staff come from, and whether it's because they're here because they've been wanting to be a park ranger their entire lives, or they are interested in one facet of it, or it's a seasonal job in between some things for them. Like regardless of what it is, like while they're there, you could tell that they cared a lot about what they do and how much it meant. And the relationships that they forged with each other were very strong. Day 4 was when we did the trips down to our satellite parks. So this was the South Run, and I got to work with Hannah. Hannah has been a park ranger for a few seasons, but is also a teacher during the school year. So it has very much like that super engaging personality and fun fact sharing. So anytime we were out there and people would stop and talk to her, like they would learn a little bit of something, but then they would try to keep her. And it was like they wanted her to stay to get more facts and learn about it. And she was just so sweet and like very dedicated to her work and getting things done. And you're doing things like cleaning restrooms and picking up litter, but then you look up and it is like you're in paradise. It's so gorgeous. And people come up to you and they're constantly like, you guys have the best job. Thank you. It's a beautiful park. Like we just had such a great time. I've never had a job where people come up to you and say things like that. And in my previous life, I was an environmental regulator, and like there was no Thanksgiving ever. So getting to see that happen, and just like the way that those each positive interactions like leave our staff feeling too, like it's rewarding for them, and they deserve every thanks that they receive and should receive more. And then during the lunch breaks, you see like people hanging out and talking to each other and really sort of developing. And what was sort of what became obvious to me as the week progressed was that they take care of each other in a way that they don't take care of themselves. And it was a particularly hot week. So there were some concerns about making sure that you took enough breaks and just not getting overheated. While like Hannah and some of the other folks, they were just like so into what they were doing that it was easy to be like, oh, we forgot to take our morning break. But in the group setting, you would just sort of get the snippets of where everyone's checking in on each other. Like, did you have lunch yet? Like, oh, it's really hot. You guys should take a break. Like, take a rest, or you should go grab one of those net coolers. They work really well. Like, do you have enough water? Like, we can stop and get more water. Like, they're constantly looking after each other. And that's just it. It's kind of, it's almost enviable when you work from home and you don't have a lot of colleagues to talk to like in an immediate basis. So like when you see that like familial type of setting and people really looking after each other, it's like so heartwarming and inspiring and necessary in a job like this. I just did this while we were out picking up some litter. One of the rare moments Hannah wasn't occupied with visitors.
I think one of the reasons I really thought this was a good program, for better or worse, is what Joe just said, that more and more people are working remotely and from home. And so even if you just get a little bit of time to reconnect with another human being and actually be a part of that team, we're all part of the team, but there's a difference when you're high-fiving or whatever it might be. There's a difference of that relationship that you build that's just amazing. And to me, it's not fair that everybody doesn't get to enjoy the thank yous and the beauty of it being out in the parks when we're all serving the same purpose. But
I think it's different when you're on the ground. My last day came very fast. This was the North Run Parks with Riley. Riley had been the park ranger assistant that was hired the most recent. So really, they'd only been there for a couple weeks, maybe, before I showed up. So getting to do the North Run Parks with me, a brand new person, was it was very fun. Riley and I got lost a little bit and it was very cool seeing her problem solve and figure out and go back to her training and think about who showed her what when, and be able to then teach me what she had learned recently. And she came here from Kansas City, Missouri. Like this was all very new to her, but you wouldn't know it from getting to watch her interact with the visitors and the way she had already kind of dialed down what she was doing. They're also a lot more keen on the safety policies when they're newer because they had just read them. So you see a little bit more of the checking and things going on. And it just was like another really great opportunity to get the personal side from our rangers. And I ended that day with Luke Parsons, who was a Park Ranger 3, and Luke has been at Beverly Beach for a while, but he just recently transferred over into IT. So he is now in headquarters. And Luke showed me a whole different side of the park operations with Kate Foulweather, it being a retail space and how much merchandise and money gets moved in and out of there, and some of the challenges that they've had. And it was really eye-opening to see from like an administrative policy level, like how much that they do and how much more help that they could use on this, because it does take up so much of the park's time and resources. And it was also just another way for other people to come in and have experiences like this from headquarters and figure out from a policy level, I am learning from here, here, and here. But if somebody from finance wanted to come in, or from communications or merchandising, or from IT, how they could talk with the park manager to have a variety of experiences, but also tailored in on some of the subjects that they might be most familiar with, so that it helps them. So some of the lessons that I learned, this is more about just me again. So it's just like nailing down logistics, safety, taking advantage of time. Okay, it's great. And really, it just comes down to listening to the field and their stories. And, you know, I would have loved it if we could have gotten all of you in uniforms today and, and tackled a couple shower monsters, but, you know, Beverly Beach is closed and, all this is open. So it's not too late.
We still have full days parks we can go play in.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, well, logistically, we'll tackle that. And then, just getting to understand what support that they need from, my position, my colleagues, and like what we can do to help support them more. And really like learning that the policy and rules in the world where I live in is super black and white, but the application of it is very grayscale, and to continue to think about that, to continue to reach out, make those connections, and understand. So I couldn't have had a better experience. Like this management unit, this crew has like such a special place in my heart. And I can't thank Dennis enough for this, Jared, my manager, Katie, for making all of this work. And then I also just got like a lot of support from random other places too. Robert Smith from safety made sure I had all my safety modules checked off. And I knew that going in that I wasn't gonna cause a lot of issues. And Darla Rugel is a park specialist over at Southern Willamette. And she helped set me up with my first set of uniforms. And then Michael Meadows from HR actually did a similar experience, a little bit different, over the winter. So we had talked a little bit before this presentation about where our overlaps were. And it really just kind of came from like the same place of curiosity and wanting to learn. And so this isn't, like Dennis said, a brand new idea, but it's definitely something that a lot of people are hearing about now and getting excited about. And this is where I'm going to stop talking and turn it back over to these guys so they can tell you what's next. Thank you.
So you can see why we picked Jo to kick this off, because she goes in with the right attitude. And one of the goals that we had at the beginning was to honor these park rangers and everybody that works within the field, because it's some of the most humble work. When she talks about shower monsters, that can be funny, but it could be gross. And it's so gross that somebody would refuse to do it. Yet we have staff that do it every day, yet still deliver the same excellent service, like they didn't just do that. So they have to be honored higher than I am in the way we deliver service. And so if we can treat them at the top of the pyramid rather than the menial work, I think we're going to get better job satisfaction and retention of workers and a better on deck for the next park rangers, park managers, administrators. And so this really comes down to job satisfaction. And what I wanted to do while we honor the field is get that perspective where they now see headquarters as another relationship to have that's actually symbiotic. We don't get paid unless somebody's working in payroll, and payroll doesn't pay unless somebody's doing the work. And so we're all working together all the time to deliver this service. And when you get that bigger world view, it makes your job make more sense. And park rangers can get into a little island, and there's 13 other management units up and down the coast doing the exact same thing with varying degrees of satisfaction or not, but mostly I would say are leaning towards the positive and delivering great service. And all this boils down to them feeling so honored that they continue every day to answer the same question and do the same menial work with a song in their heart and joy flowing from them. And so really that's the brand that Oregon State Parks is. We deliver beautiful places, but it's the people that come to deliver it for a safe way to go. Some of the things we're talking about now, I met with the park specialists on the coast. So park specialists are the office coordinators or secretaries or whatever. And so we have park specialist meeting twice a year on the coast and in other parts of the state, where instead of being individuals in a park that have a specific job and the rangers are out doing the fun stuff and they're doing payroll and all the other stuff, I want them to get together and create this community where they're not on an island, but they're part of the team. And so part of that team would be starting to do exchanges where we take a park specialist from the beach and send them to Wallowa Lake, and vice versa, just so they start feeling this continuity of membership or belonging to a bigger thing. Because I think the sooner people get that worldview, the stronger we deliver service. And so, and it's some of the most simple things, but there's a commitment to it, and it's very complex to make it happen. It's gonna cost a little bit of money, possible just disruption of some operations. But in the long run, if we can turn it into a culture of what we do, I think we're gonna create this team that blows the doors off of what we do. And so when I look at all of the even rangers, so JR's putting together a training plan right now where we exchange park rangers. When there's a roofing project and somebody needs to learn how to do roofs, we send them for a month over to another park and backfill with a temporary position. Because a lot of the time we're now hiring people that don't have the same trade skills that we used to have 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Everybody's excellent talkers and stuff, but we need plumbing and water systems and roofs on. And so we're starting to look at how we can cross-train people with experts at one park training other rangers and then passing that on. So this thing that we're talking about has a lot of layers and potential, and it just takes commitment from the leadership to pull it off.
I just, because not everybody can do it, I just want to encourage, maybe not you guys, because, but honestly, like, okay. Chair Allen, thank you.
This is very qualified for short monsters in these years.
Right.
Yeah.
But I know it's meant a lot to the heart and soul of the agency when somebody stops by you for a morning meeting, because they're so curious. And I can't help but think of the opportunities I've been given to create relationships with people in the agency, that from being here for a number of years, that so many people, we're getting so many new folks coming in that have so much to offer, and they need that base as well to have the opportunity to get to know people. I mean, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, that you know more than anybody how important relationships are with your day jobs and getting to do what you do. But for some of these new folks, I think to Dennis's point, retention could be at a higher level, because you try explaining the 34 folks, some that are here their first day, some their 18th year, they don't even know what SHPO is, or the grants, or scenic waterways. There's half the stuff that, I mean, there's so much that this agency gets to do, that bringing in the policy people and everything else, then you get to know them on a name-to-name basis, and it really just expands and makes that employee that much of a better component for the whole system, really. And it just means a lot. So many people are just so proud of what they do, but they're humble. That's why they're hired, right? Because they're here to serve the public and serve everybody and anybody around them. And so for them to get an opportunity to share that, even if it's subconsciously, I know that filled some buckets on the Beverly Beach crew. And again, Joe's one of the more amazing humans that I've got to meet.
Picture.
Yeah, get a picture of you again. But reality is it just makes us stronger as a team and more diversified, and it will get people are looking, that's a path in this agency. I didn't even think about, this aspect. Like Paul with invasive species, like there's a lot of neat that comes out of it. But I would caution that you get me 20 years ago doing it, and I could have ruined the whole system with the wrong attitude. But it does take the right people to find the right place to make it work.
Well, and a healthy workplace creates that reason to come to work. So people are finding reasons to come to work, not stay home. So the percentage of people that drive from the valley all the way out to the coast with cleanup shower, so like some people be like, why would I even drive across the street? So that culture of care and love amongst the team is intrinsic. You know when you have it, and you know when you don't. And our job as managers is to find ways to at least create the playing field for that to happen. And then people have a choice whether to participate. And we take away the excuses. If I see a crew and 9 people are happy and 1 isn't happy, that one person probably needs to find a place that's happy, because other people think it's great. And so that helps us sort through to get the very best service delivery, because that's what we're in, service. We're servants to the public. And so that's a very humble job, and I honor everybody that choose that.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, please.
So I guess I want to turn this around just a little bit. I love serving on this commission, and it's because of you guys and all the rest of the employees. I mean, that attitude Joe, to you in particular, thanks for your enthusiasm. Thanks for your smiles. And I'm pretty sure that no one has ever come to this commission and spoke about shower monsters before.
Oh, we have, you just never knew what they
I've
were.
cleaned some.
Yeah.
We
But
could,
you'll get to deal with a shower monster
But you know-
policy at some point.
I was going to say,
one time
As
Chris
a-
Parkins came with a bucket and demonstrated how you poop in a bucket when you're on a boat.
Yeah, I
He
remember
didn't
that.
actually poop in the bucket, but I think maybe that could be the next level.
Yeah.
yeah, I think this is brilliant. For all the reasons you're pointing out, and even more on top of it, just developing that sense of team camaraderie and empathy for what people are doing in other portions of the department. It's problematic sometimes to have people making policy or management decisions from Salem without actually having a practical understanding of what it means on the ground to get these things done. And I just think, Joe, you were just the perfect test pilot for this because of your cheerful attitude. You put up with falling trees and shower monsters, and clearly a tremendous abundance of chipmunks, from what I can tell with the recordings. And with a good attitude and the ability to articulate it to all of us in terms of what that's like, and that's really impressive. But I think that's it's a good model and something that could be extrapolated out in a lot of different ways. And if there's anything we can do as a commission at the policy or even legislative level to contain the shower monster menace, please let us know, because it does sound horrifying and
Everybody.
I would throw up.
and are these people not housebroken? I mean, what's going on?
Every genetic trait.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, though. I think this is great.
I would really be remiss to say, like, you know, it's such a privilege to get to tell you my story and my experience, but I would not be half as cheerful or excited had it not been for what environment this team created for me and the experiences that I got to have, everything from each morning meeting to each task. And even when they're frustrated, showing me how to best hack up at the blackberry bushes, like the team really held my hand through all of this. So they deserve all the gratitude and credit. Thanks for leading them, Jared.
No, thank you. I love this. I love the idea of it. I think not only as a former BLM park ranger, seasonal park ranger who has cleaned shower monsters and who has toddlers who I also get the experience on a more frequent basis than most. But no, I think it's so humbling and important to have that administrative level connection to what's going on the ground, because it does create better policy at headquarters. And I think it creates a lot more respect on an ongoing basis. And so just seeing this continue, I think is really valuable, really important. I hope it continues. And I hope we can maybe bring some folks from the field too to headquarters and let them see what opportunities might exist, especially, you know, with some of our temporary folks who may be looking for more permanent work down the road. And some of the younger folks who don't know what opportunities exist within parks and where they could go with a career.
Yeah, I love it too. And I see I guess the other thing I just want to recognize is how proactive you're being about seeing the opportunity to, you know, really create an even better experience for people in the field who might sometimes feel like they're on the front lines, but not necessarily recognized for being the face of the agency. And so the fact that you're thinking about this, you know, and making it even better and addressing issues where there is that gap between the field and headquarters, but also doing it not because there's a crisis in front of us, and but rather saying, here's an opportunity. How do we proactively build the relationships, learn from each other in all directions, things like that. So yeah, super, super amazing. I just want to know when I get to shadow a maker. So whenever you want. But honestly, I think it would be a fun thing to like even just think about what are those
She's
opportunities
near you very
know?
often. Usually on a bike.
It's the same thing I think
Yeah.
that we feel about our opportunities like today to get out and actually see things, which is one facet of what you're doing as well. But I think that has hugely enriched my understanding of the dynamics around things. And so I just think that is really, really important. So, yeah, thank you for doing it.
Chair Allen, you made me think of something there. I don't think we want anybody to think that this system is not working great as it is. This is just a way, kind of like Matt was talking, being with his session, is being proactive to
Exactly.
keep it moving forward in the direction and not even give it a chance to slip up.
Which is great.
Because
just as an aside, it's a little different, but I also teach in a leadership program we teach for the Portland District, the Army Corps of Engineers. And it's a different approach, but the idea is they take people from all across the district, from all different roles. So be it literally a maintenance person at Bonneville and, you know, people who do budgets in Portland and people who run, you know, down to the limit, and they spend time together, getting to know each other as much as, you know, and as we all know, it's not like what we're teaching them, it's they're sitting there talking to each other and sharing those experiences. And so we all kind of sit there and go, oh, they think we're learning from us, but they're sitting there learning from each other. And so I just love that when you look for that dynamic and those opportunities, it's just so powerful. So very cool.
Yeah, this is great to see, and it's giving me some ideas to steal from my day job too, to bring back. And yeah, speaking of which, sorry, I've been pulled away with some stuff going on because I know how much time and energy goes into this. So I wonder, do you do a job shadowing on the reverse side and give some rangers the opportunity to see the day in the life of the administrators and a little bit more of that? Yeah. Cool. So I missed that. I'm curious, when you're out there, what are some of the things that the folks you met with wanted to make sure that like this commission hears most? Like, what are the things that, just what else did not show up in your comprehensive like day in the life that you think they would want us to know?
Better pay,
housing.
No,
folks don't commute from the valley because they choose to. They do it because they can
Housing
is so expensive.
make $20 a month to do it.
Yeah, one experience I didn't really share in the presentation itself, but did have was my first day there was a concerned visitor saying that there were some people in the Days parking lot potentially like going through other people's cars and rifling through, and like maybe it was just some suspect behavior. And Paul was ready to check it out. And I was like, I'm not sure if I'm ready for this, but here we go. And knowing to try to back him up, but stay out of the way. And the immediate, like, heightened sense of awareness that you get, you know, you realize like, yes, you know, our rangers are doing everything from talking to visitors and cleaning restrooms and maintaining our facilities and doing landscape, like all the things, but a huge part of their job are these contacts, and they could potentially go bad. And that reckoning with your own personal safety and your partner in that moment, I think, you know, those are things that they're hard to articulate, and they look to our existing, you know, structures to help with the training and the policies, and just make sure that we have systems that keep like their interests at the forefront. So there was a lot of questions about like what it is that I did and could help them specifically. And when those conversations happened, you know, it was primarily around like, oh, it'd be great if we could get paid more. Like there was more effort into like housing or what that would look like. But a lot of it kind of danced around this topic of like safety. So thank you for always advocating for our rangers.
Have you seen an increase in safety concerns with pandemic and things and mental health? We have two, I just assume, but it's yeah.
So I've worked 35 years for the agency, and I have never experienced anything like I've experienced in the last 2 years, not personally, but watching rangers and the contacts and the lack of respect for authority that's coming down the line now. It's just getting
mental health side.
And so at our officers safety training for writing citations and stuff, we actually train on scene assessment and how to extract yourself or not even get into a situation before. So no administrative rule is worth a ranger's safety. And so we train in not even engaging if they have identified reasons not to, and then not getting in trouble for not engaging also, so they can show up to work the next day. So we drill that into them as hard as we can. There's folks that still might blindly go into a situation because they weren't completely aware. But we're trying to even capture that and see an assessment before you go and ask yourself certain questions. What do you see? Is it worth it? You have somebody backing you up. Is there a reason to happen now? Or could it happen in 10 minutes or an hour or tomorrow? You know, those kinds of things. So, you know, the other hard part is a lot of times there's not police presence available, you know, for situations that when we call, they may not show up at all. So engaging in the process to stop something and not knowing whether police are going to show up, it's a frightening situation. So mostly, you know, very
It's a real active shooter. Recent, we had yours with a person with the weapon in the park, and then we just had the Smith Rock incident, and we had the Detroit Lake incident with Highway 22. I mean, it's significantly, and it's not, to be fair, it's not just parks. I mean, we're interacting with visitors more frequently, but public servants in general. It's a significant priority right now for the governor's office, because whether you work for DEQ or you're working for DSL or you're working for ODF or forestry or Fish and Wildlife, the incidents are skyrocketing when somebody has to interact with a government official, and it's probably one of the biggest priorities right now, at least in the natural resource agencies, of trying to figure out how to better protect our employees in those scenarios.
we're changing our.
So if you have really good training ideas.
Yeah, we're changing.
Yeah.
Park officer safety training.
Yeah.
More scene assessment and those kinds of things.
And more mental health
health.
crisis and mental health first aid stuff, because there's just a lot different interactions that we've had previously.
It's changing faster than we can keep up with.
Yeah. So anything that you guys are gonna talk about, I'd love to.
Yeah, compare notes. Not sure.
Yeah.
I know they had the ORPA conference just recently, and so I'm not sure where this came up as one of those topics. But you know, I see a parallel. I had a lot of experience in like youth development in schools, and just the challenges of teachers and so many different hats that people are being asked to wear, and some of these kind of I don't know if it's a fail safe or sort of just like the safety net for a lot in these types of service jobs, and just how challenging it is when it continues to change.
Learn to know. Yeah.
Yeah. So I appreciate that you're able to visit and highlight more of this. And it's always good to hear, I think, as a commission, just more of what happens in some of the day-to-day. It's helpful.
It's getting rougher. I just want to thank you, Joe, but I want to thank all of you, because it's one of those moments where at 10 years in, watching the agency culture shift, right? Like, this is so different than where it was. I mean, I've been here almost 17 years, so it's so different than where it was, and watching this culture of hierarchical go to this relational, and COVID was horrible, right? Like, it was a terrible time for the agency and the world and everything else, but it has been so cool to watch these guys pop up out of this and become more relational than they were before the event. And you saw in here, she was talking about Luke is coming into IT. We have Sarah Heinsohn from Collier, who is working in communicate. I mean, we have folks that are in the field coming in and working in headquarters, and vice versa. Like, it's created this opportunity to get to know the agency differently. And we used to say things like, well, you can't come work in IT because you live over in Lincoln City, or you can't come work in communications because you live in Klamath Falls, so that'll never work. You can't be a deputy director because you live in LeGrand or Joseph, right? Guess what? You can, and it's actually really cool. So it's been really fun to watch how relational how they've embraced the relationship, and that they realize that the work is super important, the mission is super important, but without each other, it doesn't matter, right? And so it's been really cool for my heart to watch both sides of the agency come closer together. You watched Stephanie came on, Laura's not in the room. Daniel and JR and other folks have been really encouraging everybody. We have 8 districts, 8 weeks. Let's find a way to balance that gap. Daniel, you stay on while Stephanie gets out there and gets to know the agency and the people. And she's got folks that can help carry her. She can share her experience that she's bringing in. And it is a little more expensive, but I would argue that it's the best succession planning tool we've ever exercised. And probably the best retention tool. I can't measure it yet, but I can't imagine it'd be really hard for Joe to leave, even knowing she might get another shower monster. So the more you can get connected to each other and the work you do is super cool. And having it be organic rather than strategic and scripted has been really cool too. So I just there was a moment last week where I had a lot of time with Matt. And he pushed me to do a lot of reflecting because I've been doing a lot of mentoring with folks because I'm now the season director, which is weird. And talking to some of them and them saying, well, why in the counties or these other places do people know you and like they talk about you more favorably? And it's one of the things that actually Dennis taught me years ago is when I go into every county, I stop in the county offices and I'm like, hey, how are you? And it's when I don't need anything, right? It's just we just come say hi and get to know each other. So when there is a transaction and it's bad, we have a foundation, right? And so we got done with our day of 6 parks or whatever, and we had stopped in every park office and like, so just feel free to stop by and say hi when you are out and about. If you're on your bike and you see
Well, I
an
see Dennis,
e-plate.
and then you're the staff, local staff, when we were chatting on the verge there, and then they drove by and they're like, do you think we need to get out of the car and check, is Dennis handling this okay? We got a woman on the verge of the thing talking, she's not driving an official car or anything, I don't know, maybe we better stop.
Well, we were parked illegally.
I know.
They were actually trying to ticket Dennis, but those little things go a long way, and it'll also help you as commissioners better know who's in the park, why they're in the park, and you'll just get to know folks differently, and then you'll challenge us to be better. So it's really cool to watch it come full circle. So thank you for embracing it, and let's go make it bigger. And anybody that can be the ambassador, Joe, you're it. And you do look really cool in that ranger hat.
Thank you. That was my favorite.
Well, thank you.
Where's the sign up sheet for the ranger?
Nice job, Joe.
Thank you guys. This was excellent. All right, wonderful. Is that, I think that's it for the session. Are there any, so we can call that to a close, but are there any guidance for the rest of us on
So
things
there-
coming up?
there
next?
is